A nurse nearly gave me a fatal injection while I was hospitalized. Part 1. Shadows in the Night Ward. I woke up in the middle of the night with the unsettling realization that someone was standing over me. My eyes fluttered open against the dim hospital light seeping in from the hallway, and for a split second I thought I was dreaming. The figure at my bedside didn't move, didn't speak, just hovered like a shadow that didn't belong. When my vision cleared, I saw her face. Sharp, severe, expressionless. It wasn't my usual nurse, and in that moment, in that sterile, white-walled room of one of the best hospitals in Chicago, Illinois, a wave of dread spread through me so powerfully it felt like my blood had turned to ice. She clutched something in her hand, a syringe, but not the kind I had grown used to. This one was massive, almost comically oversized, the barrel glinting faintly under the fluorescent light as if mocking me. It looked more like a weapon than a medical tool. She didn't greet me. She didn't even acknowledge that I was awake. When you've been sick as long as I had been, fighting off infections, losing weight, waking up to doctors whispering at your bedside, you learn to pay attention to details. The way someone moves, the tone in their voice, the care or lack of it in their eyes. This woman radiated something cold, mechanical, and wrong. My heart kicked violently in my chest, not from the illness, but from the primal instinct that something about this moment was dangerous. I wanted to scream. I wanted to sit up, to press the emergency button, to call out for Michael, my usual night nurse who, despite his stern exterior, always cracked small jokes to keep me from losing my mind during those long hours. But my body felt sluggish, heavy with medication, my tongue thick in my mouth. She finally spoke, her voice flat and final. "Time for your medication." That should have been reassuring. It wasn't. The syringe she held was too large, far too large for a morphine dose. I knew this. I had memorized the rhythm of my treatment, the exact size of the syringes, the slight sting in my veins, the precise way the relief trickled through me like warm water. This, what she carried, was different and wrong. I croaked out words, my voice trembling. "That looks bigger than usual. Are you sure that's for me?" No answer. I tried again, attempting to sound lighthearted, non-threatening, even though fear wrapped around my throat like a vice. "I think my dosage is usually smaller. Could you double-check, just in case?" She didn't look at me, didn't flinch. Her only reply, "Go to sleep. This will be over soon." It was the way she said it, like a verdict, not a comfort, that made my stomach twist. The needle pierced my IV line before I could muster the strength to protest further. Whatever liquid filled that enormous syringe was already coursing through my veins, and deep inside I knew, with the clarity only terror brings, that something about this was not a mistake. What happened next was not the gentle haze of morphine I had grown accustomed to. At first it was heat. My skin prickled as though every pore was burning open. Yet underneath, in the marrow of my bones, I was freezing. I clutched at the blanket, but my arms barely moved. The world around me tilted, dipped, and shuddered, and then the light changed. Everything turned red. The ceiling above me pulsed in time with my heartbeat. The walls throbbed like living tissue. I blinked hard, but the crimson filter remained, stronger with each passing second. My body trembled uncontrollably, goosebumps racing across every inch of me until sensation began to fade completely. I wasn't imagining this. I wasn't dreaming. Something was happening to me, something that felt designed to push me out of the world of the living. I wanted to hit the emergency button, to call for anyone, but even my fingers refused to obey. Moving them took monumental effort, like lifting 1,000 pounds underwater. My mind screamed at me to fight, to stop the flow of whatever poison she had pushed into me, but my body was betraying me, and through it all, her voice lingered in my skull like a curse. "This will be over soon." That phrase, those words, they were not the words of someone healing me. They were the words of someone ending something. The warmth in my chest grew heavier, fuzzier, as though my heart itself were drowning in syrup. My breath came shallow, each inhale more fragile than the last. And yet, I wasn't panicking. Not exactly. There was a dreamlike fuzz that dulled the edge of terror, convincing me to relax, to let go, to drift into nothingness. But somewhere deep in the core of me, a raw animal instinct fought back. Don't let go. Don't close your eyes. Don't trust her. I struggled to keep my eyes open, but the world was fading. My limbs felt foreign, like they belonged to a stranger. I knew then, without a shadow of doubt, that if I didn't do something, anything, I would die. And the last face I would see wouldn't be the kind smile of a caretaker. It would be hers, the shadow nurse. The woman who came in the night with a syringe too big, with eyes that didn't see me as human, and with words that promised only silence. And as the darkness pulled at me, a thought cut sharper than any scalpel. What if she wasn't just a nurse? What if she was something far worse? Before I take you deeper into what happened next, let me pause for a moment. If stories like this, dark, real, and chilling, grip you the way they gripped me that night, I need your support. Subscribe to this channel now so we can continue bringing you these terrifying, true encounters. Every subscription keeps me motivated to create the next story, to share the next mystery. Don't miss what happens next. I had been in that hospital for weeks before this night, and until then, I had trusted every professional who walked through those doors. When your body betrays you, you don't have much of a choice. You rely on strangers in scrubs and white coats, people whose hands carry both the power to heal and the power to harm. But after this moment, after this faceless, unflinching nurse forced something into my veins, I understood just how fragile trust can be, and just how easily it can be used against you. The hours leading up to this night had been uneventful. Earlier that day, I had even felt a spark of hope. I had survived another round of treatment, endured the weakness that followed, and convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, I was finally turning a corner. The infection that had ravaged my lungs was under control. The surgical wound on my side was healing, slowly but steadily. My usual nurse, Michael, had reassured me before his shift ended. "You're tougher than you think. You'll get through this." Those words had settled in me like a promise. But promises are fragile in the dark. At 3 a.m., when most of the city outside was still and silent, when the world itself seemed to hold its breath, the door to my room had opened, and everything I thought I could trust shattered. The more I replayed the scene in my head, the oversized syringe, the refusal to answer, the cryptic words, the less it felt like a medical mishap, and the more it felt like a deliberate act. But why? Was I just a case file to her, another anonymous body hooked up to machines? Or was she something more sinister, a predator of the weak, hiding in plain sight within hospital walls? That night, as I drifted between consciousness and oblivion, one thing was certain. Whatever was happening wasn't an accident, and I had only begun to understand the nightmare I had been pulled into. Part 2, Between Dreams and Danger. The moment the liquid spread through my bloodstream, I knew something was wrong. My body had grown accustomed to the measured rhythm of morphine, the faint sting, the wave of warmth that dulled the pain but left me alert enough to drift into uneasy sleep. This wasn't that. This was fire and ice battling beneath my skin. It started at my fingertips, tingling as if tiny sparks crackled just beneath the surface. The sensation traveled upward, rushing into my arms, chest, neck, until my entire body felt lit from within. My skin burned hot, but inside, at the core of me, was a chilling void, like a cavern of ice expanding with every heartbeat. I tried to lift my arm, to inspect the IV line, but my muscles ignored me. The command left my brain, but somewhere between nerve and limb, it disappeared, leaving me staring helplessly at a hand that no longer felt like mine. My breath came shallow. My chest lifted only halfway before collapsing again. Each inhale scraped like glass down my throat. Each exhale a pathetic whisper of air. And then the world shifted. The fluorescent light spilling in from the hallway fractured. At first I thought the bulb was flickering, but then I realized it wasn't the light. It was my vision. A crimson haze bled across the room, spreading until every corner pulsed with red. The ceiling rippled like a living organ, beating in rhythm with my thundering pulse. The shadows stretched unnaturally, twitching, alive. I blinked hard, convinced I was hallucinating, but the red deepened, becoming so thick it felt like blood had flooded my eyes. This wasn't medication. This was poison. I forced my tongue to form words. "Help!" I croaked, barely audible. My throat felt swollen, my lips heavy, like they belonged to someone else. No one came. The hallway was empty, eerily silent for a hospital. No distant beeping of monitors, no shuffle of night staff, no murmurs of other patients. Just silence pressing against the walls like a suffocating weight. I realized then how alone I was. A wave of dizziness rolled over me. The ceiling bent and twisted, corners folding inward as though the room itself wanted to swallow me whole. The sensation in my skin began to fade, first into numbness, then into nothing. It was like my body was vanishing piece by piece, evaporating into the red haze. Panic fought to claw its way out of my chest, but the drugs smothered it with a sickly calm. My brain screamed, but my body only sighed, urging me to let go, to stop fighting, to drift. No, not like this. I had survived too much to die in silence under the hand of a stranger with dead eyes. Summoning everything inside me, I forced my thumb toward the call button clipped to my sheets. The movement was clumsy, my hand jerking like a puppet with severed strings, but somehow, by miracle or sheer stubbornness, I pressed it. The faint electronic ding echoed weakly, like a cry in the void. Then I waited. Seconds crawled into minutes. My chest rose and fell slower, slower. The red pulse in my vision dimmed, each beat of color more distant, like a drum fading down a long corridor. No one came. I told myself to hit the button again, but my hand wouldn't move. My body was shutting down. Even as terror screamed louder in my skull, my limbs betrayed me, each one falling silent like extinguished candles. I couldn't feel my legs. My fingers curled without my permission, stiff, alien. And then came the floating. Not metaphorical, literal. My body seemed to lift from the mattress, suspended an inch above the bed. For a terrifying moment, I thought I had died, that I was staring down at my body, but when I tilted my head, barely achingly slowly, I realized I was still in myself, still trapped, still suffocating. I had heard of out-of-body experiences, but this was different. This wasn't freedom, it was imprisonment in a body that no longer obeyed, tethered by thin threads of sensation that frayed with each passing breath. The room pulsed, the walls breathed, the air grew thick, viscous, choking. I wanted to scream Michael's name. I wanted him to storm through the door with his steady hands, his reassuring frown, his voice telling me I wasn't going to die. But the only sound that came from my throat was a guttural rasp. I wasn't just dying, I was disappearing. The most horrifying part wasn't the thought of death. It was the sense that I wouldn't even know when it arrived, that I'd dissolve slowly, thought by thought, until nothing of me remained. Somewhere in the haze, her voice returned. Not in the room, inside my head, whispering, "This will be over soon." The words reverberated through me, wrapping around my fading heartbeat, dragging me toward a silence deeper than sleep. I didn't know if it was memory, hallucination, or her standing outside my door, listening, waiting. But the terror it triggered ripped through the drug's fog, jolting something primal awake inside me. No, not over. Not yet. I had one weapon left, my breath. It was shallow, ragged, but it was mine. As long as I could draw it in, even if just a whisper, I was alive. I latched onto that rhythm, inhale, exhale, forcing my focus to cling to each fragile cycle. Don't forget the inhale. Don't let it stop. Minutes stretched, the red pulse slowed. My body grew heavier, sinking into the mattress, dragging me down into a darkness that promised peace but reeked of finality. And still, no one came. I was alone, drowning in silence, fighting a war inside my body that no one else could see. But I swore to myself, if I survived this night, I would find out who Nurse Evelyn really was and why she wanted me gone. Part 3. A fragile return to life. The pressure broke suddenly, as if some invisible weight crushing my chest had lifted all at once. My lungs expanded violently, greedily, like a drowning man breaking the surface of water. At the same instant, my stomach lurched, and I sat bolt upright, projectile vomiting over the side of the bed. The sour liquid splattered across the tiles, narrowly missing the figure rushing through the doorway. It was Michael. The sight of him, his broad shoulders framed by the dim hospital glow, his steady hands gripping the doorframe as if bracing himself, was like a lifeline thrown into dark waters. For the first time that night, I felt tethered again to reality. "What the hell happened?" he demanded, already moving to my side. His voice wasn't panicked, but tight, controlled, like a man walking into a battlefield he hadn't been briefed for. I wanted to answer, to pour out everything. The oversized syringe, Nurse Evelyn's cold silence, her terrifying words. But my throat burned raw, and all I could manage was a croak. My hands trembled violently, fingers spasming without command. Michael caught me before I collapsed back against the bed. He pressed a cool cloth to my forehead, his eyes scanning the IV line, the monitors, the puddle of vomit spreading across the floor. "What did she give you?" he muttered almost to himself. "She," he said she. "You saw her?" I rasped. My voice cracked like brittle paper. Michael's jaw tightened. "I wasn't supposed to be here tonight. Got called back. When I walked past the supply room, Evelyn was in there sorting doses. I thought it was odd. She's not usually on this ward. Then I heard your call button alarm." He paused, his gaze narrowing. "By the time I reached your door, she was gone. Gone. Just like that." My pulse quickened. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It wasn't just a bad reaction. Evelyn had been real. She had been in my room, and she had nearly ended me. Michael adjusted the monitors, muttering under his breath. "Damn it, your dosage was way off." I stared at him, heart hammering. "Way off? How?" He hesitated. Too long. His eyes flicked to the door, as if checking that no one else was listening. "It should have been a tenth of what you got. Enough to dull the pain. Not this. Not this. Not the floating, the numbness, the red haze that felt like death dragging me down by the ankles." I gripped his wrist, my nails weakly pressing into his skin. "She said, 'This will be over soon.'" The words hung between us like a blade. Michael froze, his expression unreadable. But in that instant, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not disbelief, not dismissal, but recognition. He had heard something like this before. I wanted answers, but my body gave way, muscles too weak to hold me upright. Michael guided me back against the pillow, his movements precise, careful, yet I could feel the tension coiled in him like a spring. "I'll clean this up," he said quietly, though his voice carried an edge, clipped and sharp. "Don't move. Just breathe. Breathe." The same command I'd given myself in the haze, clinging to each inhale like it was my last tether to the world. I watched him mop the floor, methodical, his mind clearly elsewhere. His silence was louder than words. Finally, I broke it. "Michael, was this a mistake?" His shoulders stiffened. He didn't turn to face me right away. When he did, his eyes were dark, guarded. "Mistakes happen here," he said, "even in the best hospitals. But some mistakes aren't accidents." The air in the room thickened. My skin prickled, though the fevered heat from earlier had long since cooled. I understood what he wasn't saying. There was something darker lurking in these halls. Michael tossed the soiled cloths into a bin and pulled a chair beside my bed. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, studying me as if weighing how much truth I could handle in my fragile state. "You're not the first patient who's had issues at night," he said finally. "Strange reactions, overdoses that don't make sense. But you're the first one to actually describe what happened." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" He lowered his voice. "Most don't wake up to tell the story." The fluorescent light above buzzed faintly, filling the silence that followed his words. My mind replayed Evelyn's face, her lifeless eyes the way she had ignored every question. I thought of the syringe, the cold finality in her voice. Not a mistake, not an accident, something worse. Michael's gaze shifted toward the hallway, his jaw clenched. You need to rest, but listen to me. If she comes back, you don't argue, you don't question. Hit the call button. Scream if you have to. Do not let her near you again. The warning chilled me deeper than any fever. I wanted to ask 100 questions. Who was she really? Why was she here? How many others had she visited? But my body betrayed me once again, dragging me into a heavy, dreamless sleep. When I woke hours later, the sun filtered weakly through the blinds. Michael was gone. The chair by my bed was empty, and though the room looked the same, it no longer felt sterile and safe. It felt like a hunting ground, and I was prey. Part 4. Unmasking the Angel of Death. The ward looked different in daylight. The pale green walls, scuffed in places from years of rolling carts, glowed faintly under the morning sun. Machines hummed steadily, if bags dripped at their assigned rhythm, and nurses drifted from room to room with practiced efficiency. To an outsider, it was just another hospital morning, orderly, calm, routine. But I knew better. I had seen what lived beneath that sterile mask. The night with Nurse Evelyn had split my perception in two. The surface world of medicine and professionalism, and the hidden underworld where death could be administered with the push of a syringe, disguised as care. And once you've glimpsed that underworld, you can't unsee it. I spent that day hyper-aware, every sound amplified, every shadow suspicious. The squeak of shoes against tiles sounded like whispers in a foreign tongue. The clatter of a cart outside my door made me jolt upright, convinced it was her returning. Even when the kind morning nurse, Julia, her name tag read, adjusted my IV, I watched her every movement, every flick of her eyes, memorizing the angle of the needle, the size of the syringe. Trust had died in the night. Michael visited later, his usual briskness subdued. He checked my vitals, asked routine questions, but his eyes kept darting toward the door, scanning the hallway as though expecting Evelyn to step through at any moment. When our eyes met, his were heavy, burdened by something he couldn't say aloud. You're stable now, he said, voice low, but I need you to promise me something. I nodded, though my chest tightened. If anything feels wrong, anything, you tell me. Don't second guess it. Don't shrug it off. You press the button, you call for me. Understood? The weight in his tone told me this wasn't just medical advice. It was survival training. I wanted to demand answers, but his pager buzzed, and he was gone before I could form the words. Left alone, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. Why me? Why last night? Had she chosen me at random, the youngest patient in a ward full of the dying? Or had she known something about me that I wouldn't be missed, that my illness made me a convenient excuse? The questions clawed at me until I couldn't lie still any longer. I forced myself upright, ignoring the stiffness in my muscles, and shuffled toward the doorway. The hallway stretched long and sterile, lined with half-open doors revealing glimpses of other patients. Most elderly, frail, their faces slack in uneasy sleep. Machines beeped quietly, each note a reminder of how thin the line between life and death truly was. And somewhere in these halls, Evelyn walked. I moved slowly, clutching the rail along the wall for support, my hospital gown whispering against the floor. No one stopped me. Patients wandering wasn't unusual, I guessed, but my eyes weren't on the floor. They were searching. At the far end of the corridor, a figure stood by the supply room. Her back was to me, but I recognized the rigid posture, the severe bun pinned at the nape of her neck. Even from this distance, she radiated cold authority. Evelyn. A chill spidered down my spine. She wasn't doing anything out of place, simply sorting supplies, scanning labels. But after last night, every movement seemed sinister, every gesture a disguise. The image of her pushing that oversized syringe into my IV replayed in my mind like a broken film reel. I should have turned back, returned to my bed, pressed the call button, begged Michael to intervene. But something deeper than fear anchored me to the floor. I had to see her again. I had to know if last night had been real, or if my drug-hazed brain had painted a monster from shadows. She turned suddenly, and our eyes locked. For a split second, the hallway froze. Her gaze was sharp, dissecting, as if peeling away layers of me with nothing but a glance. Then just as quickly, her expression softened into the bland politeness of a nurse on duty. She offered no smile, no greeting, just a curt nod before disappearing into the supply room. My stomach twisted. That absence of warmth, that void where empathy should be, it was the same as before. It hadn't been a hallucination. Back in my room, my mind spun faster than my weakened body could keep up. I thought of Michael's words. Most don't wake up to tell the story. The implications were staggering. How many accidents in this hospital weren't accidents at all? How many patients had slipped away in the night under the guise of routine care? The detective in me, the part forged by endless hours of crime shows and true crime podcasts, began to stitch the threads together. Hospitals were perfect hunting grounds. Victims already weakened, their deaths explainable, their silence guaranteed. Records could be manipulated, doses miscalculated, symptoms attributed to existing conditions, and Evelyn, efficient, detached, unnoticed, fit the profile too well. But suspicion wasn't proof, and proof was the only thing that could keep me alive. That night, when the ward settled into its unnatural quiet, I stayed awake, feigning sleep. My heart hammered with each footstep outside my door, each squeak of a cart rolling by. Hours dragged, the red digits on the wall clock glowing like embers in the dark. At 2:47 a.m., the handle turned. The door creaked open. And there she was. Evelyn entered with her usual precision, closing the door softly behind her. The light from the hallway framed her silhouette, tall, rigid, unyielding. In her hands, she carried a tray of instruments, glinting faintly in the dim light. My blood turned to ice. I forced my breathing to remain slow, steady, as if I were asleep. My mind raced, cataloging everything: the tray, the size of the syringe she placed beside the bed, the way her eyes lingered on me. Calculating cold. If she touched the IV line again, I had seconds to act. I slid my hand beneath the blanket, inching toward the call button. My thumb hovered over it, slick with sweat, ready to press at the first sign of danger. Evelyn leaned closer. Her breath ghosted my cheek, icy and sterile. She whispered, not loud enough for anyone outside to hear, but clear enough for me. You should have let go last night. Every muscle in my body screamed to move, to fight, to scream. Instead, I pressed the button. The alarm blared, shattering the silence. Evelyn froze, her eyes flashing with something sharp. Anger, surprise, before her mask returned. The door burst open and Michael stormed in. His eyes darted from me to Evelyn to the tray on the table. His jaw clenched. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. Evelyn's voice was smooth, practiced. "Routine check. Patient seemed restless." Michael's gaze cut to me. My lips trembled, words barely forming. She... He stepped between us, his presence a shield. "I'll take it from here." For a moment, Evelyn didn't move. Then she collected the tray, her expression unreadable, and left without another word. The door clicked shut. Michael turned to me, his face grim. "Now you understand," he said. "You're not safe here." So part 5. Lessons in the shadows. Morning came, but it brought no peace. The ward, once a place of quiet healing, now felt like a stage where death prowled in plain clothes. Every passing nurse could be friend or predator. Every syringe could be salvation or a weapon. Michael hadn't said much after Evelyn left my room that night. He had pulled up a chair, sat down across from me, and stayed there until dawn, his silence both comforting and terrifying. His eyes never left the door. When he finally spoke, his words were measured, deliberate, almost rehearsed. "You need to understand something. Hospitals aren't just about medicine. They're about control. The line between care and harm, it's thinner than people realize." I stared at him, heart thudding, waiting for him to continue. "There are people who take advantage of that line. People who don't see patients, just bodies, opportunities. You saw her last night. You know what I mean. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. How many? He hesitated. That silence told me more than numbers ever could. Too many. Michael leaned forward, lowering his voice to a whisper. Some call them angels. Angels of death. They convince themselves they're helping, easing suffering, but that's not what this is. Evelyn isn't merciful. She's deliberate. The words settled into me like poison. Every memory of her, the oversized syringe, the cold tone, the whisper in the dark, sharpened with new meaning. She hadn't made a mistake. She had chosen me, and I had survived. But survival came with responsibility. For the rest of that day, I replayed every second of my encounters with her, searching for clues. Why me? Why that night? Her eyes hadn't shown pity. They hadn't shown anger either. Just emptiness, as if ending me was no more significant than turning off a light. I realized something chilling. I wasn't special. I was just convenient. Young, sick, isolated. My death would have raised fewer questions than an elderly patient whose family visited daily. That realization broke something inside me. I wasn't targeted for who I was. I was targeted because I could vanish quietly. The detective in me, the part of my brain that had been clawing at patterns since the first syringe, took over. I needed to know how many others she had silenced, how long she had been walking these halls, undetected, unchallenged. When night came again, I refused to sleep. Every sound was a clue, every shift in shadow, a potential threat. At 1:13 a.m., I heard wheels squeak against tile. Not unusual, except they stopped right outside my door. I forced myself still, breathing evenly, pretending to sleep. The handle turned, but it wasn't Evelyn this time. It was Julia, the morning nurse. Her kind face peeked in, eyes tired but soft. She adjusted the monitor, scribbled something on her clipboard, and left quietly. Relief washed over me, but only for a moment. Because now I knew Evelyn could strike at any time, disguised as routine, masked as care. Michael was right. I wasn't safe here. By dawn, exhaustion blurred my thoughts. But a grim clarity remained. I needed to leave this place. If I stayed, she would try again. Yet leaving wasn't enough, because if I walked away, someone else would take my place. Someone else would meet Evelyn's dead eyes in the night, hear her whisper of finality, feel the poison creep through their veins. I couldn't let that happen. But what could I do? I was just a patient in a hospital gown, frail and weakened. She was a nurse with authority, with access, with years of camouflage. That's when I realized the truth. The only weapon I had was my story. If I survived long enough to tell it, to expose her, I could take her power away. I looked at my trembling hands, at the IV snaking into my arm, at the pale walls closing in. Fear churned in my stomach, but beneath it was something stronger. Resolve. I wasn't just going to survive, I was going to fight.